leaders of the world. Welcome to Spread Love in Organizations, a podcast for purpose-driven healthcare leaders striving to make life better around the world by leading their teams with genuine care, servant leadership, and love. I'm Naji, your host today. So many times we hear about selfless leaders. Until you hear and meet Dr. Daphne Haas-Kogan, you obviously didn't really see what selfless leadership is. Daphne is professor and chair of the Department of Radiation Oncology at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, Brigham and Women's Hospital, Boston Children's Hospital, and professor at Harvard Medical School. After her Biochemistry and Molecular Biology degree from Harvard University, Daphne received her MD from the University of California, where she served as vice chair for research and educational program director. Daphne has been elected in 2019 to the National Academy of Medicine, considered one of the highest honors in the fields of health and medicine. She has been selected as one of the top physicians in the United States by several publications, including Best Doctors in America. Daphne, I am just so honored and thrilled to have you with me today.
It's entirely my honor and my pleasure, truly.
I would love to start, Daphne, with the very beginning. Let's say, what's your personal story? Who you are as a person, and what got you to healthcare and being the leader, the physician, the healthcare provider that you are today?
So I recall from very early in childhood wanting to treat children with cancer. I don't recall the exact impetus when I was young. It was a time, of course, when children and their families were in great need, emotionally, psychologically, physically. And I had a sense that that would be a place where I could truly contribute. I have an interesting family story that I think has always positioned me to have this drive to make the world a better place. Both of my parents, my mom's from Poland and my father's from Holland, and both of them are Holocaust survivors. And they each have interesting family and personal histories that highlight the fact that people who were strangers to them saved their lives and saved the lives of many. And I remember even from very early in my childhood, the sense that I really had an obligation to pay it forward or pay it back, however one wants to articulate it, and that it was really on me to spread love, as your organization states, and really do everything that I could to do right by others, even others that I had never met, and leave the earth a better place than when I arrived on it.
Wow. And you've taken this to a different level. Obviously, you're actually doing it, impacting children, patients at their toughest moments. How are you defining today your purpose, and how you take this and you do it with all the team that you have? You are in leadership positions. So how do you do this, and you transfer all that you're bringing to so many for your impact to be even broader?
I think of myself as being part of a team and part of a path with patients and their families that's honestly more fulfilling for me personally than I could have ever imagined a career being. So when a child and their family come to me for my expertise or my support, or in need of a person who's going to travel a very challenging path with them, holding their hand along the way, having the background, having the expertise, the education to walk that journey with them is a privilege beyond what I could have ever imagined. The fact that families in their greatest time of need put their trust in me is so deeply rewarding to me. It's really what propels me and what helps me get up each and every morning, even when I'm wishing I had more sleep. More recently, since I moved from the University of California, San Francisco to Harvard, I've had more responsibility in administrative and leadership roles. And I find myself really transitioning from being focused on my career to some extent to being focused on other people's careers. When people talk to me about becoming the chair of the Department of Radiation Oncology, I often reflect on the fact that I never actually recall having an aspiration to be a chair of a department. And in fact, I very often was very reluctant to think of myself in this role. I think because I'm very conscious of the fact that at least in my opinion, power is a very undermining and corrupting force, and to me, actually not being in a position of leadership and power was a more impactful, straightforward way to contribute to the world. So it was with some trepidation and uncertainty and kind of dubious thoughts that I did take on this position. And it was a little bit of a leap of faith, kind of jumping into the water to see what it would be like. Mm-hmm. What's turned out to be very true for me personally is that, and now I harp back to the transition that I was talking about a few minutes ago. I think the transition to a leadership position has to be at a time, and was at a time for me in my life, where my career, my personal career, mattered much, much less to me, in the sense that there wasn't that much more, honestly, that I really wanted to accomplish. It was a transition in that I have 3 children, and my youngest was finishing high school. So I was going to be newly empty nested. I have a wonderful family that I thought was getting settled, and I needed to worry a little bit less about them perhaps. And I didn't really have very obvious, frank, tangible career aspirations that I hadn't achieved. So it was a very, very natural point of transition for me to start turning away from a focus on my personal aspirations to supporting others' aspirations. So the transition from less of a leadership position to more of a leadership position that came along with moving from San Francisco to Harvard was a very poignant time for me, in terms of it was no longer about myself. Really, it can never be about me anymore, but it always now should be about supporting other people, be it patients or their families or relatives or staff or colleagues, faculty members, colleagues, other chairs and the like.
I love it, Daphne, how you're framing it, which is quite the opposite of usually being a manager or in a leader position, how people would think of it. Like, you're literally seeing it at the service of your people, right? Which is really the servant leadership and the, caring about the others and developing them. It's amazing how you framed it. Like, it's this tipping point where you really wanted to focus on others that brought you to a leadership position. And did you change your opinion about power now that you are one of the most powerful in the institutions that you lead?
Well, that's definitely not true, but I certainly have more responsibility and accountability than I did before. I definitely have not changed my position and my feelings. In fact, the longer I'm in the position, the more I realize that it really can never be about oneself when one leads a group like this. That really one must focus on those that one leads, and my conviction, if anything, has strengthened as it relates to that. And I do really feel, and I often reflect on the fact that I do think that power is a corrupting force. I mean, when one has let's say I have it's under my purview to offer somebody a position. Any kind of, if I ever get a feeling of wow, I'm in charge here, I know that I need to look at myself and back it up and be introspective and be clear with myself about what the driving force has to be, and that can never be about power or control or any of those synonyms. But it requires, for me at least, I mean, there are probably people that are a lot more selfless than I am, but for me at least, it requires constant reflection on, is my motivation at this moment on this day as it should be, and constantly being aware that my motivations can never be corrupted, and if they ever are, I need to move along to something else.
Any concrete example on this, like how you manage it, self-reflection? If you take the recruitment, you talked about recruitment, like any processes you've done as a leader to make sure that you bring diversity, inclusion, like you're aware of all the unconscious biases that we might have as we're recruiting. Any concrete example you can tell us to get inspired and apply?
Well, in this time of very heightened awareness of inequities that we honestly should have been aware of for decades, I find myself questioning myself very often. For example, if I'm ever part of a group where, let's say, I express questions or doubts about whether we're being as inclusive as we might be, if I ever have a sense of, wow, that was a good thing you said, or a sense of feeling proud of myself for, let's say, saying the right thing, I immediately put the brakes on and question myself and the purity of my motive. Like, are you doing this because it's the right thing, or are you doing this to make yourself feel better? And I always try to back it up and make sure I'm doing it because it's the right thing and never to make myself feel better. I went to school and I trained in San Francisco in the 80s and the 90s. And it was at the height of the AIDS crisis in San Francisco. And at the time, I had a pretty traditional heterosexual marriage with, cute little children. And the education that I received from training in healthcare at a time when there was so much bigotry especially against gay men, And looking back at my own bigotry was very transforming for me. And I think because I grew up in my family of origin and my community of origin is very conservative and very traditional. And I grew up with very kind of traditional family values, and having to question those and look at myself in a very critical light, especially during the early days of the AIDS crisis, really taught me a lot about the room for growth and room for education and room for change. And then kind of my family's history of basically being persecuted for who they were, not having any control about whether they were born Jewish or not. And then the fact that I was a woman in the sciences, which wasn't the easiest thing, especially not, 30, 40, I guess not quite, decades ago. And then almost 20 years ago, when actually I came out as a lesbian, all really brought home to me how deep-seated frank bigotry, and also, as you say, kind of implicit bias and explicit bias is, that every single one of us has that in us. And if we don't question ourselves every minute of every day, we will inadvertently act on those biases. I know that I make mistakes right and left every day. And if I don't have it in me to examine my own behaviors and my own thought process and my own inclinations, and make sure that I, as much as possible, am always fighting for the underdog, be it underrepresented minorities, disenfranchised communities. That's an enormous component of my mission and leadership, and requires attention a lot. It's not something I think that can be taken for granted, or honestly, that even comes naturally to me.
Oh, thank you so much, Daphne, for sharing your story and sharing this this with me. It's building on this, we discussed it last time offline, and how you manage from obviously all your beliefs, all your learning, with this genuine leadership, your teams. You also went during the last year and still ongoing this year with the pandemic, and healthcare has been challenged. It's been tough for you, for your teams on the front lines, but still you lead them. They show up. You show up for them. So beyond thanking you and everyone saying how much we appreciate, and the heroes that you are literally every day for all those patients that you serve, any key leadership lesson for you during those times, with your team, and with all that you learned throughout the years, and your personal story?
I think one of the most important lessons that I probably learned, but it was brought home so clearly to me, was something that, again, I think I learned from my teachers and mentors when I was a student during the AIDS crisis, but now I had to really practice and exercise as a leader. And that is honesty and transparency, and owning getting it wrong, and being willing to admit mistakes and do better. So, for example, very early on, within days of the pandemic, because we treat cancer patients, and that's not, it's not it's because it's a necessary procedure. we couldn't stop treating our cancer patients. It wasn't like they weren't elective procedures or elective surgeries. So we had to continue treating our patients, and our staff had to continue coming in to treat the patients in person. And I saw everybody around me, our staff, the patients, the trainees, the students, the every role group, the radiation therapists, the nurses, the medical assistants, the physics staff, the dosimetry staff, the child life specialists, and so many more. I saw that they were terrified to a large extent because it was so unclear how broad and how deep the dangers were. And we had young people who were caring for elderly parents at home, or for small children, or for themselves, or who were pregnant, or had other responsibilities. And here they were coming in to treat sick cancer patients, and it wasn't clear to what extent they were exposing themselves to risks. And it was really hard to assuage their anxieties because, honestly, number one, they were putting themselves at risk. And number two, it wasn't really clear how big the risk was to them. And number three, we didn't know how to mitigate those risks. So, for example, at the beginning, not only did we not have any personal protective equipment, PPE, we didn't even have masks. We had nothing. And what we heard was that because of the way this virus spread, it really wasn't necessary to mask. That was the original. That was the original message, and of course, that's what I told my staff. And in fact, I distinctly recall one. Might have been the first or second day, very early on after we went virtual, but of course, going virtual was really hypothetical for most of us because we had to be there for the patients. And one of the trainees had a mask that they had gotten from the outside world. So they hadn't gotten it from the hospital, but they had acquired it, outside. They had access to masks. At the same time, our young therapists who were actually who were also at the front lines, treating patients, every minute of every day, didn't have masks because they didn't have access to masks outside the hospital. And we didn't have masks in the hospital to provide them. And I went to the trainee and I actually asked this trainee to take their mask off. And because I didn't feel that it was right for somebody who might have been a little more privileged and had access to a mask outside to wear one within the department, when others who were really, face to face within inches of a patient's face, not having access to masks.
Wow. And
I think back at that now, and I'm mortified and ashamed.
That was just surreal, right?
Like, how could I have said that? How could I have told somebody to take off their mask? They had their own set of fears, and of course they were also in danger of contracting COVID. So it was, it was painful then, but it's 100 times more painful now in some ways to look back and see how wrong I got it. But I think when it became clear that masking was absolutely imperative and the right thing, then owning it and saying to the whole department, I really got this wrong and I'm really sorry, was a very, very important step. And I harped back and thought, this is something that I learned when I was a trainee, because I saw other people owning their mistakes, owning things they got wrong, owning their fears, owning their insecurities, owing what they did know and also what they didn't know. And I realized that it was others who taught me, who put themselves out for me as a young person, as a young mother, as a trainee, as a young healthcare provider, that helped me be transparent, honest, open, and accountable now as a leader. I reflect on the fact that it's really not easy to feel so exposed and to feel so wrong. I really have gotten it so wrong in a way that feels very personal. But I also realize that if one is going to lead through a crisis, that's what I have to practice and try to keep doing better every day.
Yeah, and you took accountability beyond any leader, right? You took accountability on a decision that you made, but it was not only you, right? Like these were the guidance. You're a physician, so you lead by the state of the art and evidence at that time. So, but still coming back and taking the ownership and saying, I got it all wrong. Many would have said it's not me, it's whoever, right? Like the CDC or someone else who got it wrong. But I think again, it's another point of honor, honestly, for you and your leadership. Being transparent and owning whatever we do, right or wrong.
It was very offline when we talked before. That's one thing, even though we haven't known each other for that long, that was one thing that I found really inspiring about your and Zina's stories. And hearing so much from many of our colleagues about the goodness that you two spread, that has really inspired me to really engage with this spread love in organizations. And why I feel so honored to be speaking with you.
Thank you, Daphne. You're way too kind. I think all of us as human beings, even before being leaders or whatever, as human beings, we all try and bring an impact. And we're definitely driven to help people in where they need most. So we definitely share, values, and we share also the same purpose. So it's just amazing to have you with us. I would love, now to jump into a little bit different section where I will be giving you one word, and I promise there is one word here. You might smile. I because you said it many times. I wrote it before the interview. So let me give you this word and then tell me whatever you have top of mind. Okay?
Sounds good.
Great. So women in leadership.
I think women have a very important role to play in leadership. On the one hand, I think women have themselves experienced inequities. On the other hand, I think women are in more empowered positions than many other groups. So we're in this sweet spot as women where many of us have very much felt what it's like to be treated unfairly and not be given opportunities, perhaps to be judged prematurely about our abilities or our roles. But we've also come a long way. So we're empowered to help other groups that are tens, if not hundreds of years behind us in terms of opportunities. So for me as a woman in leadership, and I think for all women in leadership, there's an enormous responsibility of taking the experiences that we've had, both the unpleasant experiences, but also the experiences that we've had in our mentors, our colleagues, our students empowering us, and making sure that we pay it forward, and empowering and assisting and mentoring and supporting those who have not had quite the opportunities that we have. And of course, there are many such groups.
What about innovation?
Innovation is a very interesting word to follow women in leadership, because I've been reflecting very often on the fact that I find in general that many of my women colleagues in leadership don't think about innovation as a mission. And I think we should. I think we many women that I've encountered, including myself, at least I very much put one foot in front of the other and don't actually think much about any innovative contributions that I could ever make. But in some ways, it's not true. There are things that I think about, ideas that I have that are innovative. And I think it requires me and other women to step out of our comfort zone and to be brave and to think, yes, we can be innovative. We have innovative ideas, and we should engage others and try to do something new, something outside the box, something that doesn't feel as comfortable and might be different, but is worth taking the chance for.
And do you have like a feeling of what might be holding you or the women back? And what's your advice?
Yeah, I thought a lot about this. I don't have that much of a deep insight. I would say that women that I am exposed to on a professional level, many of them have been socialized to be very given and be motivated very much by benevolence. And sometimes for me, the concept of innovation feels a little self-serving. Of course, it isn't. But sometimes it gets attached to feelings of being self-serving, which then honestly feels like a turnoff to me. Like I would myself, and I think many women, colleagues that I interact with, want to make sure that our mission is to do right by others, not ourselves. And so I don't think we often think of ourselves as having innovative ideas to share. Frankly, it's a reason that I find myself, and I find that many other women, shying away from public speaking or speaking to groups, because in a very similar way, I mean, I certainly feel like I don't have very much to offer, like a group of listeners, let's say. But
you're
it's
offering
probably,
so much today, Daphne.
Oh, you're so kind. But I think it takes just being brave with thinking about things a little bit differently. So maybe I don't have as much to offer as somebody else who has more expertise than me, but maybe I have my personal story to offer, and maybe my idea is a little bit more innovative than I think. I think it's perhaps a little bit part of the socialization process of what motivates women, or what women feel like should motivate them. But beyond that, I'm sure there are other insights that others would have that I would be very interested to hear.
Yeah, definitely. It's part of also your humble leadership. I think your story is amazing, is so inspiring, and can definitely inspire so many people who are listening to us. But you're such a humble and selfless leader. This is what's bringing those words. The next word I have, I literally wrote it before, so it's questions or questioning.
So although I did say that I grew up in a very traditional household and a very traditional community and culture, the culture that I did grow up in was very much valued questioning and curiosity. So curiosity as in a lifelong learner, but questioning in a way that steps beyond just lifelong learning, and honestly questioning authority and questioning the status quo. And that's one thing that I very much enjoyed, and I didn't really understand how much I would enjoy this in my leadership position. That I think because of the way I grew up, I'm not afraid to question. And when I'm with my team, I find the role of questioning in a very open way very comfortable. And I think it's extremely important in any organization, but in particular for leaders, to be very comfortable with questioning and always question assumptions, question the process, question the conclusions, very much not in a judgmental way, but rather in a truly and deeply open and curious way, but question nonetheless.
And I can attest that you have the best questions always. The last one I have, you shared it a little bit in the beginning, spread love in organizations. What's top of mind?
So of course you and Zina are the beacon of that and all that you do, how you think and how you execute. For me, honestly, getting to talk to people like you is an enormous part of the inspiration. And ultimately, I think probably the most life-altering experience I had was actually having children. And that really taught me a lesson that I think I really needed to learn. And well, two lessons, the lesson of patience and the lesson of selflessness. And having children teaches you patience and selflessness very, very quickly. It's like a crash course in one night. You get to practice it all. And the ability to practice selflessness and kind of very deeply dedicated, devoted, unconditional love in child rearing and raising a family has very much guided my feelings of spreading love in my leadership position in my workplace. I look back at times where I felt like I felt so challenged, so unworthy, really like I wasn't going to make it for one reason or the other. And I think of people who approached me with openness, curiosity, as we said, and honestly, just devotion and love. And that's what got me to the next day and helped me move on and have more confidence in myself and gain the strength in myself to then go and be able to give to others. And now it's time for me to do for others what others did for me and continue to do for me. I think even about coming to Harvard and how difficult that transition was for me. And there were people right and left that were there for me, whether it was by just inquiring how I was or helping teach me or not making me feel silly when I asked a question that wasn't all that educated. I mean, it took so many forms and facets, the support and love that was that I was afforded, and so in every stage of my life and my career, that the least I can do for my community and for the world is to pay it forward by spreading the love.
I'd love to hear a final word of wisdom for, for your students, the other leaders that you have, for our little kids growing, and dreaming of changing the world and being the future leaders in healthcare around the world.
Well, we've talked about many of the themes that are really central to what makes me tick. Maybe one thing that comes to mind that we didn't talk about is one thing that's been very, very helpful to me early in my career, but in particular in my leadership position, is always to think how it feels, how a word, a sentence, an experience feels to the other person. Never to jump to conclusions, and always to think well of the other. Think well of my colleague, think well of the organization. Any tendency that I might have to think that somebody is approaching me with ill will or has a poor motivation is a feeling that I actively try to resist, and I would advise others to constantly resist. And the approach of always thinking well of others and making sure I think, what does this feel like to them? Where are they coming from when they're reacting to me? How did the experience or the word I said or my tone, how did that land with them? Where are they coming from in their reaction? That's really helped me be a more thoughtful and inclusive and effective leader.
Well, thank you so much. What an inspiring leader, selfless leader you are, Daphne. Thank you for being with me today and for all that you do every single day, helping so many patients and giving back love, care, and compassion for all the people that you lead and for all the patients that you treat.
Well, it's people like you and Zina that inspire me. So the gratitude goes from me to you, in fact. So thank you.
Well, thank you all for listening today. Let's stay connected on SpreadLoveIO.com, Apple, Google, or Spotify to hear from great leaders in healthcare. Most importantly, spread love in your organizations and spread the word around you to inspire others and amplify this movement our world so desperately needs.